let's unpack this. $6 trillion. That's the projected annual cost of mental health disorders globally by 2030. I mean, that's just a truly staggering figure.
It really is.
But here's where it gets, well, really interesting. What if the clothes you're wearing right now could become a key part of, understanding and supporting your mental well-being?
Yeah, what's fascinating here is this whole emerging field exploring exactly that. We're about to take a deep dive into smart textile technology, right? And how it's being developed to monitor these intricate connections between our physical and mental states.
Exactly.
And that information you share, the academic review, it gives a fantastic overview of the latest progress.
Exactly. So the mission for this deep dive is really to explore how this tech offers a completely new approach, comfortable, continuous,
Yeah.
for you to understand that tangible link between your body's signals and your mental health. Think of this as your shortcut, maybe, to getting a solid grasp on this cutting-edge field without getting totally lost in the technical jargon. We're aiming for those aha moments as we sort of piece this fascinating puzzle together.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we'll be covering quite a bit of ground today. We'll start by looking at how mental health actually has real measurable effects on the body.
Okay.
Then we'll explore the innovative textile-based sensors being designed to pick up on these sometimes very subtle cues.
Right.
We'll also dig into the advancements in electrotechnology that make it possible, the development of actual smart garments, and even touch on how data analysis, AI, is playing a pretty crucial role. And the ethics, too.
Good point, yeah. And just so you know where this is coming from, this deep dive is drawing heavily from a recent systematic review. It was published in the journal Sensors back in February 2025. So it's pretty much as up to date as you can get.
Definitely.
All right, let's get started.
Okay, so let's begin with that fundamental understanding. How exactly does what we experience mentally, impact our physical bodies? It's really essential to recognize that mental well-being isn't just in your head.
Right.
It manifests in very real physiological changes. The review article you shared nicely groups these bodily signals into 5 main categories.
5.
Yeah. First, there are electrical signals, like those measured by an ECG for the heart.
Electrocardiogram, right.
Exactly. And an EEG, electroencephalogram, for the brain. Second, we have mechanical signals, things like your breathing rate and pattern, the rhythm of your heartbeat.
Makes sense.
Third are chemical signals. Think about the composition of your sweat, for example, including levels of substances like cortisol.
The stress hormone.
That's the one. Fourth is thermal, which just relates to changes in our body temperature.
Okay, so our bodies are constantly sending out these signals. Can we dive into some specific examples from the review, how these signals might shift when someone's dealing with a mental health challenge?
Absolutely. Let's start with the heart's electrical activity, the ECG. What's really interesting is that subtle changes in these electrical patterns have actually been observed in people with conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and even depression. Then there's heart rate variability, HRV. Think of HRV as a measure of your body's resilience, almost, like how well your nervous system can adapt to different situations.
Okay, so not just speed, but adaptability.
Precisely. A lower HRV is often seen in people experiencing mental health disorders. It's kind of like the body's engine isn't idling as smoothly, if that makes sense. And this seems particularly relevant in understanding neurodevelopmental conditions.
That's a really helpful way to think about HRV. What about the brain's electrical activity, the EEG? That feels like a very direct link.
It is, absolutely. An EEG measures those tiny electrical signals from the brain's neurons. In conditions like schizophrenia, for instance, EEG can detect patterns of, altered brain activity. The review points out that changes in the power of different brainwave frequencies can be indicators for various disorders. For example, an increase in slower brainwave activity, like delta and theta waves. That's been noted in ADHD, schizophrenia, and OCD.
Interesting.
Depression, on the other hand, often shows changes across a wider range of brainwave frequencies. But it's worth noting, the review didn't find significant EEG differences for conditions like PTSD, addiction, and autism.
Okay.
Which suggests these physiological signatures can be quite specific.
That's an important nuance. So it's not like a single red flag for everything. What about how our skin responds or our breathing?
Right. So galvanic skin response, GSR, or electrodermal activity, EDA, it measures how the electrical conductivity of your skin changes.
Okay.
These changes are often linked to our emotional state, how stressed we are. Interestingly, research suggests GSR could potentially be a marker for understanding the long-term impact of trauma, adverse post-traumatic neuropsychiatric sequelae, or APNS. It might even help distinguish between bad stress, distress, and good stress, eustress.
Wow, okay.
And when you consider breathing, the rate and pattern can be deeply connected to our mental state. Anxiety and depression, for instance, can lead to breathlessness or hyperventilation, panic disorders. You might see very irregular breathing, changes in volume, maybe chronic hypocapnia. Even conditions like schizophrenia and melancholia have been linked with distinct changes, shallow and rapid or deep and rapid breathing.
It's fascinating how interconnected it all is. And you mentioned chemical signals, cortisol. How on earth can fabric monitor something like that?
Yeah, cortisol, the stress hormone, is a crucial indicator. High levels are often seen in depression, bipolar disorders, PTSD.
Right.
The encouraging bit is, as mental well-being improves, cortisol levels tend to normalize, so it's a valuable marker to track.
Okay.
And the review highlights this really exciting development, a non-invasive sensor for detecting cortisol in sweat. It uses a technique called electrochemical impedance spectroscopy, EIS. Yeah, think of it like sending a tiny electrical current through the sweat and seeing how things in it, like cortisol, affect that current. The sensor uses gold electrodes on a very fine porous membrane, and it's designed to work within the typical range of cortisol in sweat, about 8 to 140 nanograms per milliliter.
That's incredible.
It's a huge step towards being able to, continuously and comfortably monitor our stress levels.
Yeah, that's really impressive. So, okay, our mental state leaves these tangible physiological imprints. Now, how do we actually get these sensing capabilities into the fabric? That sounds like quite an engineering feat.
It really is an innovative area. Textile-based sensors, well, the name says it, sensors integrated directly into fabrics. The review outlines several key ways they do this.
Okay.
One approach is during the actual creation of the fabric itself, knitting, weaving, even embroidery, but using special conductive materials.
Right.
Another way is through printing. Things like screen printing or inkjet printing to apply conductive inks right onto the fabric.
Like printing circuits on a t-shirt.
Sort of, yeah. And finally, there's embedding, where sensors are incorporated into garments using a flexible polymer matrix.
And what kind of materials make these work? It's not just cotton or polyester, I assume.
No, not usually. They often have specialized properties like conducting electricity or responding to physical changes. We're talking about conductive yarns that can be woven in, tiny fiber optic strands, conductive polymers, piezoresistive textiles.
Piezoresistive.
Yeah, they change their electrical resistance when stretched or squeezed. And even inks made from advanced stuff like graphene.
Graphene, okay.
The major advantage, the real kicker compared to traditional bulky sensors, is the huge increase in comfort and wearability.
That makes sense.
They can be seamlessly put into everyday clothes, right? Allowing for continuous, subtle monitoring, but still being flexible, customizable. Plus, and this is key, some are even designed to be washable and durable.
Washable smart clothes. That's a leap in convenience I hadn't really considered.
It's essential for practical long-term use, absolutely.
So we know how to integrate them, but what specific sensing capabilities are being developed that are really relevant for mental health monitoring?
Well, the review details several exciting advancements. For monitoring breathing, for instance, researchers are developing stretchable fabric sensors using carbon black ink embedded in a flexible polymer, PDMS.
Yep.
These work on that piezoresistivity principle. As you breathe, the fabric stretches, its resistance changes. Simple but effective.
Right.
Other approaches use conductive textiles with silver-coated yarn and elastic bands around the chest, or even specific knitted structures using silver-based conductive yarn. A primary focus in all this is biocompatibility, making sure the materials are safe for long-term skin contact.
Crucial point, yeah. Comfort and safety have to be top priorities if you're wearing this all day. What about those more direct brain indicators, the EEG signals? Are there textile sensors for that too?
Absolutely. The review highlights stretchable, thin film electrodes you can place right on the skin. They've tested them on the back of the neck and the occipital lobe, back of the head, to pick up alpha waves, linked to relaxation, and also SSVEP signals related to vision.
Wow.
For ECG, monitoring the heart, there are thin film electrodes made of gold and graphene designed with an open mesh layout.
Why mesh?
It helps maintain good skin contact and minimizes interference from movement, motion artifacts. And they've shown these can work reliably for up to 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay.
And going back to cortisol, those advanced sensors we talked about, using inkjet-printed graphene electrodes modified with gold nanoparticles and anti-cortisol antibodies.
Right, the ones that bind to cortisol.
Exactly. They detect tiny changes in electrical current when cortisol binds. Super sensitive, working in the picomolar to nanomolar range.
The pace of innovation sounds, well, rapid. So it's not just the sensors, but how they connect the electrodes. What's the progress specifically in electrode tech for smart textiles?
That's a critical piece, you're right. The focus is really on seamlessly integrating conductive materials into the fabrics to capture those biopotentials, ECG, EEG, E2GO. The review mentions a range of materials. Conductive yarn like silver or carbon-plated nylon, conductive fabrics with fine metal wires woven in, conductive polymers applied via screen printing like polystyrene sulfonate, and graphene electrodes made by dip coating, spray printing, or even using lasers on carbonized materials.
So why these instead of just using the traditional sticky gel electrodes we see in hospitals? What are the advantages here?
Great question. Traditional silver chloride electrodes, the sticky ones, they're great for signal quality short term. But for long-term wear, not so much.
Right, they get uncomfortable.
Exactly. The gel can dry out, which messes with the signal, and the adhesives often irritate the skin, cause rashes. Textile electrodes, though, offer huge improvements in comfort. They're typically more breathable, flexible.
Makes sense.
You can integrate them right into clothes, making them way more convenient for continuous monitoring and reducing that skin irritation.
And the signal quality, is it comparable?
For ECG, studies share they can achieve signal quality very comparable to traditional electrodes. You can clearly see the PQRST complexes, the key parts of the heartbeat.
Okay.
They can provide stable recordings for up to 24 hours, minimize those motion artifacts, and some even achieve very low skin electrode impedance, similar to gels. There's an interesting example of an arm-based textile electrode, which could be way more comfortable than chest straps for long-term monitoring.
An arm-based ECG. That sounds much less obtrusive for daily life. What about for skin conductance or brain activity?
Yeah, for EDA or GSR, traditional methods often use rigid electrodes like rings or wristbands. They might not be great for capturing subtle, quick changes. Textile electrodes can have better skin contact, potentially capturing both the slow baseline shifts and the quick phasic responses more effectively.
Okay.
There's even work on flexible electrodes using materials like PIVA and PDMS that look promising for monitoring respiration, using both fabric strain and changes in bioimpedance.
And EEG. You mentioned challenges with hair.
Right. And this is really clever. There's development in conductive hook fabric electrodes, tiny hooks that can gently penetrate through hair to make direct contact with the scalp.
Oh, way.
Yeah. It eliminates the need for messy gels or even shaving. These have shown lower impedance, higher signal-to-noise ratio, and generally better performance than standard EEG electrodes in some tests.
Electrodes that work through hair, that sounds like a genuine game changer for usability.
It really could be.
So with these advanced sensors and electrodes, we're truly moving towards smart clothes. What progress is being made in actually creating these garments?
Exactly. Smart clothing integrates these sensors and electrodes right into everyday garments for continuous monitoring. The advantage is huge. Comfort, seamless integration into life compared to traditional medical devices. It allows for truly continuous data collection without being disruptive. These garments often use textile electrodes, silver yarns, conductive elastomeric fibers to capture ECG from key body locations. We're seeing simple single-lead systems for basic rhythm analysis, but also more sophisticated multi-lead systems, up to 12 leads, like in a clinic.
12 leads in a shirt?
Potentially, yeah. And there are even non-contact capacitive electrodes being developed that can measure ECG through the fabric.
Through the fabric, wow.
Which could further minimize any skin irritation issues.
That sounds incredibly convenient.
Oh.
And you mentioned smart clothes monitoring breathing, too.
Yes, several methods. Piezoresistive sensors placed on the chest or abdomen measure the expansion and contraction. Capacitive sensors use changes in electrical capacitance.
Okay.
There are even textile-based antenna sensors where the garment detects breathing based on how chest movement affects radio signal strength. And simpler methods, too, just conductive threads stitched in that stretch with each breath, changing their resistance.
So many different approaches. Are there actual examples of these garments?
Definitely. The review mentions a smart sock for EDA monitoring. It showed a high correlation with signals measured from the hand, the traditional spot.
A A smart sock for stress.
Basically, yeah. There is also a proof-of-concept EEG garment made entirely of threads, fabrics, smart textiles with electrodes placed according to the standard 1020 system used in clinics.
Fully textile EEG.
And even a textile cap with 4 EEG channels that showed about 72% accuracy in detecting emotions in one study.
A cap that detects emotions. This really feels like technology moving in a very personal, potentially very helpful direction. But with all this potential, what are some of the real-world applications the review highlights for mental health?
This is where it gets tangible. Think preventative care, continuously monitoring stress via HRV, maybe cortisol, giving early warnings before burnout hits. They could be invaluable in occupational settings, identifying stress patterns in high-pressure jobs. For kids with developmental conditions, EEG sensors and textiles might help with earlier detection of things like ADHD. And for older adults, perhaps dealing with depression or loneliness, these garments could monitor physiological signs. Maybe AI could detect emotional states, or even trigger haptic feedback for social interaction reminders.
Haptic feedback, like a gentle nudge.
Potentially, yeah. But the review is clear there are challenges. Real-world accuracy, sensor robustness, can they handle daily life, washing, and user comfort is absolutely key.
Absolutely. It has to be practical and reliable to make a real difference. And we've talked about gathering data. How is that raw data turned into something useful?
That's where AI and data analysis are crucial. You get these vast streams of physiological data from the textiles.
Right, potentially 24/7.
Exactly. It needs processing and interpretation. AI algorithms can be trained to recognize patterns linked to different mental states, detect anomalies from someone's personal baseline, and provide personalized feedback or alerts.
So, spotting subtle shifts, we might miss ourselves.
Precisely. An algorithm could learn your typical HRV pattern and flag significant dips that might mean rising stress, or identify long-term trends, giving a much richer picture of well-being over time. It opens doors for more proactive, personalized mental health support.
That's powerful. But using AI on such personal data, that must raise some serious ethical questions, right?
Oh, absolutely. The review emphasizes this. Data privacy is huge. Who owns the data? How is it secured? Encryption, secure storage are vital. Techniques like differential privacy might help protect individuals.
Okay.
Then there's informed consent. People need to clearly understand what data is collected, how it's used. Transparency is key. And bias is another big one. If the AI is trained on limited data sets, it might not work fairly or accurately for everyone.
Yeah, that's a critical point.
We need diverse data sets. The concept of privacy by design, building privacy from the start and adhering to regulations like GDPR is essential.
Makes sense. Beyond ethics, what about just getting people to use these? What are the barriers to adoption?
Several things. Comfort and design are paramount, as we said. If it's itchy or looks weird, people won't wear it. That's where things like conductive fabric electrodes and stretchable bioelectronics help.
Right.
Cost is another factor. Technologies like inkjet printing could potentially bring costs down. Material safety and skin compatibility are non-negotiable. Thorough biocompatibility testing, dermatological safety checks are needed. Some conductive materials might cause allergies for some people.
Good point.
And ease of use. It needs a user-friendly interface, simple pairing with phones, maybe via Bluetooth. It can't be complicated.
And what about the environment? Making all these smart clothes, does that create new problems?
That's a growing concern, definitely. The review touches on sustainability. Researchers are looking into biodegradable materials for sensors and fabrics. Energy efficiency is important, low-power sensors, maybe even harvesting energy from movement or solar power integrated into the garment.
Solar-powered shirts.
Potentially. And recyclability, designing them in modules so parts can be replaced or recycled easily.
Okay, so lots of challenges, but also solutions being explored. You mentioned personalization earlier. How does that work?
It's about adapting to the individual. Everyone has a different physiological baseline, right? The system needs to learn your normal.
Okay.
It also needs to support diverse use cases, monitoring stress during work versus tracking sleep quality. And tailoring in function, maybe someone only needs ECG, another needs respiration and EDA. Collaboration between engineers, healthcare pros, and the actual users is key here.
So it's not one size fits all. What about getting these approved? Are there regulations?
That's another hurdle. There's often a lack of standardized guidelines, specifically for smart textiles in healthcare. Getting regulatory approval, like from the FDA or CE marking in Europe, is necessary if they're marketed as medical devices.
Right.
We need interoperability standards so different devices and platforms can talk to each other. They also need to adhere to medical-grade textile standards like ISO 10993 for biocompatibility. And rigorous quality assurance and testing protocols are essential.
Seems like a complex landscape.
Yeah.
How do these fit into the idea of digital therapeutics or DTX?
They can really enhance DTX. Imagine using them during cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. The Textile could provide real-time feedback on your physiological state during exposure exercises, for example.
Ah.
They enable much better remote monitoring for clinicians, tracking adherence to treatment, seeing how patients are doing between visits. And they could improve engagement, maybe using haptic feedback to guide relaxation exercises or reinforce positive behaviors.
So integrating the physical feedback loop directly into digital treatment.
Exactly. It makes the therapy potentially more embodied and effective.
It's interesting, though. You hear about all this amazing research, but you don't see smart shirts everywhere yet. Why the lag in commercial success? Are there big manufacturing challenges?
That's a really important point the review touches on, citing work by researchers like Ramos and Majemiter. Despite years of research, widespread commercial success has been limited. A big part of it is the challenge in actually manufacturing sensing garments reliably and at scale. There's surprisingly limited info published on the detailed manufacturing methods.
So what do we know about how they're made?
Well, there are traditional textile techniques adapted for this. Knitting or weaving with conductive threads to create things like temperature sensors or electrodes for biopotentials. Embroidery can be used to create circuits or sensors for pressure or respiration. Dip coating can apply functional materials onto fabrics to make them durable.
Okay, using existing methods but with smart materials.
Right. But then there are more advanced manufacturing techniques being explored too. Things like vapor phase polymerization to create conductive polymer coatings for tactile sensors. Spray coating for precise application, maybe for supercapacitors or humidity sensors, screen printing, as we mentioned, for conductive inks, ECG electrodes, even energy storage.
Wow.
Electrospinning to create nanofibers for things like piezoelectric energy harvesters or even drug delivery systems woven into the fabric. Carbonization to turn fibers conductive for electronic skins or pressure sensors, and using hydrogels to make stretchable, even self-healing conductive fibers.
That sounds incredibly high-tech. So what's the bottleneck in manufacturing?
A lot of it comes down to the fact that combining these traditional and advanced methods is often very custom, very function-specific for each type of smart garment.
So it's hard to scale up.
Exactly. It hinders scalability, durability, and cost-effectiveness. You need process standardization. You need seamless integration of the electronics, maybe using roll-to-roll printing or automated stitching. Ensuring durability and washability is tough, needing protective coatings or inherently robust fibers. And finding cost-effective production methods is key. Maybe those inkjet-printed sensors or biodegradable electronics could help there.
So bridging the gap between lab prototypes and mass production is still a major hurdle.
It really is. It requires overcoming challenges in materials, integration, standardization, and cost before we see these widely adopted.
This has been a truly insightful exploration into the potential and the challenges of smart textiles for mental health monitoring. To wrap things up, what would you say is the most important takeaway for our listener today?
I think the key takeaway is really the exciting potential here. This idea of seamlessly integrating technology into our everyday lives, literally into our clothes, to gain a deeper understanding of our mental well-being. It could really pave the way for more proactive and personalized support.
And while the potential is huge, as we've discussed, there's still, quite a bit of work to be done.
Absolutely. Ongoing research and collaboration across so many disciplines, materials, science, engineering, healthcare, psychology, design, it's all crucial to overcome those remaining technical hurdles like signal artifacts and durability, and also the practical interdisciplinary challenges for market viability.
Looking forward, what are you most excited about in the future of this field? Where's the cutting edge heading?
Oh, I'm particularly enthusiastic about continued improvements in the materials, making them even more biocompatible, durable, comfortable. And optimizing the AI analytics, getting more accurate, nuanced assessments, scalable, cost-effective manufacturing is obviously huge. And also the push towards sustainable and biodegradable sensor materials is really important.
Yeah, definitely. This has been truly eye-opening. And on that note, here's maybe one final thought for you, the listener, to consider. Imagine a future where your clothes are providing you with subtle, continuous insights into your well-being. potentially leading to earlier support, a greater understanding of your own mental health patterns. What possibilities and maybe what responsibilities does that future hold for you personally? It's definitely something to think about.
It really is.
Perhaps you'll even be inspired to look into some of the researchers or articles we've touched upon today. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.